Did you know your credit card points and miles can lose value to inflation? Credit card companies often reduce the redemption value of your points and miles. Now imagine a credit card with rewards that can grow in value. With the Gemini credit card, you can earn Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos instantly with no annual fee. Every swipe at the store or gas pump earns you instant rewards deposited straight to your account. Plus, sign up now for a $200 Bitcoin bonus to kickstart your rewards. Visit Gemini.com/card today. Check out the link in the description for more information on rates and fees. Again, if you're looking to invest in Bitcoin but don't know where to start, the Gemini credit card makes it easy.
Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you. I was doing my conference preview yesterday of the ACC, which was a good conference preview, but we missed quite a bit of news in college basketball. Cal State Bakersfield had everything come to a head. We were hearing rumblings about the fact that one of their assistant coaches, Assistant Coach Mays, was involved in some trafficking, unfortunately, and Kevin Mays, he got let go, and as a result, we now have a new shakeup with regards to the coaching staff here, and that means that Mr. Rod Barnes, he decided that he was going to step down / get fired, however you want to call it. Cal State Bakersfield, they now have an interim / acting coach in Mike Scott. We're going to be taking a look at that. And then KK Robinson, who I thought was going to be one of the better mid-major players in all of college basketball over at Little Rock. This happened a few days ago, but the news was very slow to trickle out. A lot of places were not reporting on this until really late Wednesday, early Thursday. He's out for the season, so we need to take a look at those two situations. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Bakersfield situation and just all the coaching hoopla over the last few weeks in segment number 2 with one of our good friends. Old Moneyline Mac, Ryan McInyre of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We've got a lot to unpack with him, so we've got a jam-packed show. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire this in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, the name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And while I did not get in any Twitter / X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever. With EdgeBoost, 100% of gambling transactions do get approved, and when you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll get you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. And the biggest piece of news that we've seen over the last 48 or so hours, the fact that Cal State Bakersfield, they had their coach in Rod Barnes step down / get fired. He had been with the program for a very, very long time, and there are rumblings that this was going to be his last year. I got that from our good friend Rocco Miller. It's actually going to be joining the podcast within the next 48 to 72 hours. So we're going to talk about that aspect of things a little bit more. I believe that they're going to be playing against Ole Miss in a little bit of a Rod Barnes tribute game, and Rod Barnes is not going to be on the sideline for it. As we know, with Cal State Bakersfield, they were always an old school team under Rod Barnes. He was always a guy that made sure that his teams would play good, tough, tenacious defense. He was there since the 2011-12 season, led that team to a NIT Final Four, actually, over at Bakersfield as well. I personally picked them number 4 in the Big West, but I no longer do have Rod Barnes because Kevin Mays, this is a college basketball podcast, so we're going to stick to college basketball mostly for this, but I will say, the charges, if he's guilty of what's been brought about him, my goodness, you want to talk about something deplorable, he is right now facing 11 different counts of just like pandering, pimping, human trafficking. Yeah, not good. Not good. That's our hottest of hot takes here. I know. We're going yelling on saying that there shouldn't be pimping and pandering going on, but that's exactly what he's facing right now. And with Rod Barnes, obviously, it does not seem like he has any involvement in that. But when you are the head coach of a program, you are overlooking everything. As Slick Rick Pitino about the stripper situation and all that was going on there. And as a result, he is now ousted. And now Mike Scott, who actually used to play over at Fairleigh Dickinson, had been a part of the coaching staff for quite a while. He takes over, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see if Bakersfield, for one, has any guys enter in the transfer portal. As of right now, I have not seen anyone. enter into the transfer portal. I am refreshing, making sure that I'm staying up to date with that as I'm doing with the Wofford situation. I've not seen anyone from Wofford enter into the transfer portal either, but those are two very, very unique situations, and certainly we'll be talking about the Wofford situation with our good friend Ryan McInyre here in a few minutes as well. But that said, man, this is going to be a very unique case because, as I said, with Bakersfield, always had that distinct style. They were good to be a pretty good under team year in and year out because they were always a bunch that they took a lot of twos, they played good, tenacious defense, were always one of the slower teams in all of college basketball. We'll see what sort of style Mike Scott starts to play again with him playing at Fairleigh Dickinson and a little bit more of a tempo style. Perhaps this is going to be a little bit more of a new look team, but that is certainly going to be of intrigue. And then just really, really sad to see what happened here with KK Robinson being out for the season. And I thought that this guy was going to have a massive year for Little Rock. And as a matter of fact, I picked Little Rock in terms of my projector or finish number one out there in the OVC. I have to reevaluate things a little bit. I might still land on Little Rock when it's all said and done, but initially with this news, I'm thinking that they are going to be landing at number two. They're still going to be a solid team. This is still going to be a bunch that out there in a OVC that, let's call it what it is, it doesn't necessarily have like just oodles and oodles of teams that are going to be finishing in like the top 150 or anything like that. As a matter of fact, number 100 might be able to get you to the NCAA tournament, but for Little Rock, they had a nice, slow, controlled style. They're going to be a little bit more of a top-heavy team, but they were supposed to be getting it back a guy in Robinson that, you want to talk about a guy that in his last season that we saw him out there on the floor, he was an absolute dominator. 23-24 campaign, he was averaging 15.8 points, right around 5.5 boards, 4.3 assists per contest. He was going to be the nucleus of that Little Rock team. For the second straight year, goes down with an injury. You just absolutely hate to see it for a guy that has worked so hard. And in a Little Rock program that it's been up, down, all around for them. Keep in mind, just a few years ago when they were under the tutelage of Chris Beard, they were able to win a game against Purdue in the 2016 NCAA tournament. I know that might be a little bit more than just very, very recently, but and so this is a program that has had a lot of success. Now they're having to go up against the likes of a Southeast Missouri State, who I think that they are going to be in for a very good year. I still think that Southern Indiana is a team that you very much want to be watching out for. I think that Southern Indiana has a chance to really have a big year this year as well. So you've got a lot to be taking a look at on that front, and this certainly puts them very much behind the eight ball is the best way of being able to put it there. So we shall see what is going to be happening on that front. But for this Little Rock team, now they're going to be a little bit more hampered. Not that they don't have like star players or anything like that. With this Little Rock team, they still have a guy in Jonathan Lawson who's back. He's a double-figure scorer from a season ago. Braxton Bayless was a guy that was rock solid over at Western Kentucky. You got Dokung Gakic. I always get that last name wrong. But now they're a team that I had a fear coming into the season. They were going to be a little bit top-heavy. Now they're going to be very, very top-heavy. So a lot going on in college basketball while I was doing my ACC conference preview, and we've had a lot of coaching moves over the last few weeks. We're going to unpack that and so much more with one of our good friends in Ryan McInyre on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast.
Did you know your credit card points and miles can lose value to inflation? Credit card companies often reduce the redemption value of your points and miles. Now imagine a credit card with rewards that can grow in value. With the Gemini credit card, you can earn Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos instantly with no annual fee. Every swipe at the store or gas pump earns you instant rewards deposited straight to your account. Plus, sign up now for a $200 Bitcoin bonus to kickstart your rewards. Visit Gemini.com/card today. Check out the link in the description for more information on rates and fees. Again, if you're looking to invest in Bitcoin but don't know where to start, the Gemini credit card makes it easy.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Always a pleasure to be joined by this man as we've got Ryan McInyre aboard. He does such a tremendous job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he and Kobe Dant, another man that joins this podcast quite a bit, they do a great job with the show, The College Experience, over there at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And I know that they're knee-deep in football. And as a matter of fact, our good friend Ryan, he was over at East Carolina a few days ago taking in a game there. He's going to be Morgantown this weekend, as he also does a great job with the Ryan and Rush show that is all dedicated to West Virginia athletics. So this man has his finger on the pulse of a little bit of everything. Always provides such great insights when he joins me, and you're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Moneyline_Mac, spelled M-A-C. And Ryan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, Greg. College hoops is getting closer and closer.
Yes, sir, it is. And typically this time of year, we're getting into our previews and we know what we've got, but just how have you taken a look at this last 2 weeks of college basketball where we've seen now 4 different coaching moves, and typically we get 1 or 2 of these during the offseason. I can never remember a more strange period in middle September than what we've seen here over the last few weeks, with so many different things happening and all for different reasons.
It kind of blends in with the times that we're in, with the crazy portal, the crazy NIL, the Wild Wild West there is what I like to call it. I do agree. It almost makes you not want to start your previews until about mid-October, because you might put out a preview and then next thing you know, Coach A is retiring or Coach B is stepping down or Coach C is getting fired for a lawsuit or whatever. So crazy times.
Oh, it certainly is. And I mean, out of all 4 of the coaching moves that we've seen, I feel like out of the 4 programs, the one that's in the worst circumstance right now is Wofford, a team that I actually put number 2 in my SoCon Conference preview, because I actually did my conference preview a few weeks ago thinking, oh, Wofford, they've got Dwight Perry back. And you know what? They've got a good system. And how do you take a look at that ordeal? Because they hired on Coach Glittner, who was an assistant over at Virginia Tech, used to play for Wofford, but there have been players that have been threatening to enter in the transfer portal, not play this year. That out of these 4 situations to me feels like the most volatile, and that feels like the most, just for lack of a better term, toxic.
It really does. And it kind of feels like that was a witch hunt. They wanted to get him out. There wasn't alignment from the coaches to the athletic department, administration. What they fired him for, I thought, was really weak, especially in this era where we could pay players legally. So, Wofford's an interesting team. Glittner, you mentioned it, comes over from Virginia Tech. He was on Mike Young's staff at Wofford. So he at least knows the Wofford brand and the Wofford way that Mike Young had so much success. But it's different when you don't really get to recruit your team and grind with your team the whole summer.
Yeah, but absolutely. And man, it is just absolutely wild what we've got on that front. And I know that we've talked a little bit about the SoCon, and I think that you're in agreement with me, with Furman being the clear number 1 team. But now where does Wofford go? Because there's a lot of teams that dealt with a lot of guys that entered in the transfer portal. I love Chattanooga, I love Coach Earl, but that's going to be a little bit of a new look team. Obviously, Sanford, they lose Bucky McMillan as well. It feels like it's a very wide open conference, and I thought that Wofford, out of those teams that might finish in the middle, would be the team that ascends. And well, I can't stand by that statement anymore with this.
I agree. I think Wofford probably still is a top 3 just off of roster, as long as they keep all their guys. I think Furman is in its own class, but this is a good league. This is always a good league. East Tennessee State's been to the tournament. Sanford's been to the tournament. We've had 6 different tournament champions over the last 6 years. It's always such an evenly balanced league.
Yeah, but it certainly is, and that one is going to be so intriguing, to say the least, as Ryan McInyre does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. He is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And when it comes to Cal State Bakersfield, meet me for the Roadrunners. This was a bunch I thought was going to be interesting for the upcoming season, because it always felt like you had consistency with Rod Barnes there. You knew that they weren't going to explode and be some super amazing offense or anything like that. Typically, they would have 1 or 2 guys that would really be the, shall we say, do-it-all sort of guys. You would have one guy be putting up 18 plus points per game, and they would run the offense through him. Now with Rod Barnes out, and I haven't seen exactly what they're going to be doing for an interim coach, because one of the assistants and Coach Mays, that's the reason why Rod Barnes decided to step down / got fired, however you want to put it. This feels like a bad situation as well, because there's as much unknown as it gets as we're doing this podcast right now. And just to let people behind the curtain, we're doing this Friday night. There's still a lot of mystery where the Bakersfield situation might not be horrible, but this could turn out to be an absolute disaster too.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in alignment here. I was already skeptical of Bakersfield. Now you have the coaching change. They could be a rude awakening in a tough year for these Roadrunners.
Yeah, I just don't know where they go as well, because I just mentioned it. You always knew what you would get from this team defensively. You knew that, they're probably not going to be bombing it from 3. They always were, in terms of percentage of shots that came from 2-point range, towards the top of all of college basketball. So they would always be looking to pound it down low. Now where they go from here is such a question mark because with Bakersfield, I actually put them number 4 in my projector offensive of the Big West. I actually had expectations for them. Now, I just don't know where they go because these teams like UC San Diego, UC Riverside, they are in a little bit of transition with regards to their coaching staff. That's the reason why I put them below Bakersfield. But now Bakersfield doesn't have their coach anymore. Now I have to put them below those teams.
Great. I think that this is a bottom 3, bottom 4 team in the league. Like I said, man, I was already hesitant on Bakersfield coming into the year. Now Barnes isn't there. He had been there forever. So just so much unknown. Definitely a team I want to fade in November and December, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And I mean, you could always bank on that defense being there. So when they would be catching double figures, that would typically be enough for them to be able to cover those games. Now we just don't know anymore on that front. But what we do know is that we've got a very knowledgeable man here on Coast to Coast Soup. Says we've got Ryan McInyre aboard. He does great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. And then the highest profile coach that decided that he was going to, in this case, step down. This isn't as toxic of a situation. That'd be Auburn with Bruce Peal deciding that he is going to end his coaching career. Now, what he's going to be doing after this, I know that people have been speculating he might run for Senate and things like that you can look on your own time. I'm focused on the basketball side of things here, so we're not going to be diving in there. But what we do know is that Stephen Pearl now takes over the program. And just what are your expectations for an Auburn team that coming into the year, I did have a few question marks with them with all the losses that they had. And with Stephen Pearl, obviously he's going to be able to retain these guys. It's not like you've got a situation like with Wofford where this is a bait and switch sort of ordeal. And it felt like there might have been some rumblings behind the scenes that this might be happening sooner rather than later. But certainly you now have a guy that has never really been a true head coach now taking over an SEC program.
I think the benefit of what Stephen Pearl is going to have is he'll still have Bruce around to kind of be an ambassador and help him along the way. So back years, we lose a famer in the month of September last year. I think Tony Bennett shut it down in August, actually, and now we get Bruce Pearl. You're seeing these guys more and more just get burnt out of the craziness, the madness of the new college game with the NIL and portal. And I think we all kind of knew that Bruce was kind of on his last legs, and he has definitely been more outspoken on the political side of things, and we'll see if that's the avenue that he ends up going with next in his career.
Yep, it is going to be so interesting to see what he's going to be doing. Best of wishes to Mr. Bruce Pearl, whatever he decides to do. And as of right now with this Auburn team, I do look at them and I think that it's going to be a little bit difficult for them in the SEC this year. I'm not sure where you sort of have them in terms of hierarchy, but I think that they might be more towards the middle of the SEC, which a lot of people might take that as a little bit of a slap in the face. The middle of the SEC, a lot of teams wish that they were in the middle of the SEC with how good it is, but I want to get your thoughts on this team because with Todd Pettiford, obviously he's going to be rock solid, but losing guys like Janai Broom, having so much experience from a season ago, and having to replace that with pretty much a sophomore leader, I thought regardless of whether or not it was going to be Bruce Pearl, Stephen Pearl, or anyone else at the helm for the team, that it was going to be a little bit of a drop-off.
It was such a magical year for the Tigers last year at Auburn. It was always going to be a little bit of a drop-off just with how much they lost and all those seniors, and it was a crazy year. They were number one literally the entire season after they beat Houston game number 2. So Stephen Pearl's going to have to really coach him up here. This was going to be a challenging job already for Bruce. Now Stephen gets to kick off his career with kind of a work in progress roster. I do agree, middle of the pack probably. But you know, Auburn, they always reload because they have money down there and they get guys in the portal.
Yes, they certainly do. And I do think that they are going to be such an interesting team in an SEC where I do feel like there's quite a few sleeper teams as well, because a lot of people take a look at the SEC and I feel like it's really hard to be able to power rank some of these teams right now, because I took a look at a team like Vanderbilt that I think a lot of people will probably have them towards the middle/bottom half of the conference. And that's a team that I just continue to feel a little bit better about. Like, interestingly, with myself, my first job out of college was I was doing weekends for the official flagship station of the Vanderbilt Commodore. So I guess I have a little bit of affinity with them. But that said, I do want to get your thoughts on this SEC, because I do think that Auburn is going to be one of those teams in the middle. And I feel like there's a lot of teams that are in the middle that if things go right, they could be like a top 10, top 15 team. And I think that Vanderbilt is right now headlining that list for me.
Vanderbilt's got it rolling in all their sport. They've really invested in their athletic department. We've seen the football momentum, and I think that really carried over into basketball last year with Mark Byington. Year number 1, being able to get that thing to the tournament from where they were was an unbelievable coaching job. And I kind of think he's going to go back to back. I think they're going to get back to the NCAA tournament. Byington's a really good up-and-coming coach. I like some of the pieces that he's brought in.
Yes, I do as well. And with Vanderbilt, I was saying this the last few years, and I do firmly believe it to be true. Who knows what happens if you don't have some of these guys getting injured? Like they had Garland in there for many, many years. They had so many good top flight guards, and it felt like they got injured like 5 games in. Jerry Sackhouse just got really the short end of the stick there. I don't know if he was necessarily the world's greatest coach. He's one of the best dressed coaches. I do know that, but that said, who knows what happens if they don't get banged up? But I am Byington certainly has things rolling. And I know you've talked very glowingly about Chris Beard. What are your thoughts on Ole Miss for this upcoming year? Because that feels like a team that is not getting a lot of attention. That feels like one of those teams that, again, a lot of people are going to be picking them towards the middle, maybe a little bit higher than the middle of the SEC. But that's another team that I think can really ascend in an SEC where I think that the margins are going to be very thin from like team number 1 to team number 5. And I certainly think that Ole Miss could be a top 5 team.
I agree. And Chris Beard's the guy I blindly back all the time. He does an unbelievable job, whether it's at Texas Tech, Arkansas, Little Rock, obviously the short stint at Texas, and last year getting the Rebels to the second weekend. He's as respected an in-game X's and O's and practice coach as any coach in the country. I like their pieces. They're interchangeable. I agree. I think they're a top 5 team in the SEC, and I think they could even get to a Final Four potentially if they get the right draw.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. With Ole Miss, they did a nice job of being able to have a little bit more size than a season ago as well. Having a guy like a James Scott who comes over from Louisville, I think that that's very beneficial. The one place where they were really suffering, it felt like last year, was on the glass, and certainly, they do have some moving parts, but being able to have Corin Johnson come in as well, he was another guy from Louisville. They've got 2 different guys coming in from Louisville. That's big. And how much do you look at that? Because that's something that I feel like I've gravitated to here in the NIL and the transfer portal era. Whenever you've got multiple guys that come over from the same school and they commit to a program, that's something that really stands out to me. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I still remember when Southern Miss brought in a bunch of guys from Mercer. They had like a ridiculous against the spread run that year as well. And that's something that I've really been putting a star around. And that's what's really drawing me to Ole Miss as well.
It makes sense because there's continuity, there's chemistry, and they're used to playing with one another. Now they're just going into a new system. So, yeah, I mean, we saw it last year with Ben McCollum's group win 30 games straight. Now they're all going to Iowa. Love when you can get continuity with guys that have played with one another.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that as well, because that is one of the most interesting teams in all of college basketball for my money this season, as well as Ryan McInyre does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. What should the expectations be for Iowa this year? Because, I mean, you can't have much more of an opposite style than you had last year with Iowa. With Iowa under Frank McCaffrey, you knew that it was going to be a rock-solid offense, and you knew that the defense was going to be coached up by Casper the Friendly Ghost. Now you've got a coach in Ben McCollum that, in terms of possessions per 40 minutes, was pretty much last in all of college basketball. These are guys that about 24 months ago were playing at the Division II level. Now they get their crack at the big boys in the Big Ten, and it's going to be such an interesting case study because I feel like we've never really seen quite a run like we've seen from Ben McCollum's, for lack of a better term, Northwest Missouri team going all the way up to Iowa now.
I think they're going to be a tournament team. McCollum is just a winner. He wins wherever he goes. They won 30 games last year. They won an NCAA tournament game against Missouri. They've proven that they can beat Power 4 teams. They beat K-State in the non-con. It wasn't a fluke last year. And I think that they'll go right into the Big Ten, and I think that they'll compete probably around that middle of the pack. But in the Big Ten, that's good enough to get you to the big dance.
Absolutely. And Ryan, I do have to ask you about this. It's always one of my favorite questions to ask you because I know that you and Kobe Dan over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network are doing such a great job of getting set for the upcoming season. But has there been a team or two that you've been researching over the last few weeks that you just feel a little bit differently on? This could be to the positive. This could be to the negative. This could be any one of the Division I college basketball teams. So dealer choice here. But has there just been a team that's been coming onto your radar over the last few weeks, whether that be to the good or the bad, that you just are feeling a little bit different about now?
Well, yeah, so we just did the MAAC preview, and I like the Manhattan Jaspers. I think Gallagher's a really good coach. Year 3, they took a huge jump from year 1 to year 2. He got the raw end of the deal at Hartford when they went down to D3 after they went to the NCAA tournament. I think the Jaspers are right there to win the league in the MAAC. The other league that we just got done previewing was the Patriot League, and I'm gonna dip my toes back into Colgate. Last year was a complete rebuild, and Matt Langel still got third place, and everybody was coming back on all the other teams. Colgate's got a little bit more coming back than they did last year. I think Colgate's right there to win their 7th out of 8 Patriot League championships this year.
Now, I will say, I actually do have Navy in the Patriot League just because they quite literally return the most minutes of any team in all of college basketball. I just can't look past that, but I've got Colgate at number 2 personally, and I did pick Manhattan, number 1 in my projector finish for the Metro Atlantic. So both of us are quite bullish on those teams. I fully expect both of them to have a nice year, and I know you're going to have a nice year, Kobe. I know that you're going to have a nice year, Ryan, because I know that you and Kobe Dan doing such a tremendous job over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. You're locked in on a little bit of everything, and I know you're going to be taking in some college foosball this weekend and every weekend moving forward. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Appreciate it, Greg. Yes, at Moneyline_Mac for my personal and at TCE on SGPN. Go check out the college experience. This is a great time of year when you get the football and basketball crossover. A lot of action, a lot of games to bet on.
Absolutely, and Ryan, he's doing such a great job of being locked in on it all. A big thanks, Ryan, for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jude_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm indeed with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. We're up to 2,150 straight days without a miss podcast and 4 conference previews remaining. Big 10, Big 12, Big East, and the SEC. All the rest of the conferences already have their dedicated conference preview podcast, just like I did for the ACC yesterday. So be on the lookout for those, and be on the lookout for a fresh podcast tomorrow. Thank you.
Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. The Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. Use it like any credit card. Buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee, and right now you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Go to Gemini.com/card to learn more. Terms apply. See the link in the description for more information regarding rates and fees.